an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sabriel, chapters 23, 24, 25, and 26. In these chapters, Caragor is here, ladies and gentlemen, and unfortunately, our little ragtag crew does not have the advantage that Harry and his friends did when trying to get rid of Horcruxes, because Caragor knows exactly what the fuck they're about to do. I did not anticipate the involvement of basically a whole regiment of professional soldiers. Not that they seem to be super helpful. We'll see. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Abbey for commissioning this episode. And Abbey is here. Yay. Hi. I am really enjoying, I have to be honest, this is moving faster than I expected. I am surprised at how quick they have run into Caragor. And, I'm looking, and we're about 2/3 of the way through the book at this point, at the start of chapter 23. So I guess I should have expected it, but it just feels like it's happening, like we're running into this big bad sooner than I anticipated, and with more of a straight up confrontation than I anticipated. I am really interested in what Caragor's overall goal is, because there is something that Sabriel says at one point. She says he's one of the great undead, maybe the great dead. And I can't help but wonder, is that true? Or is he working for someone else? He's just, to begin with, he's just a person. And I want to know exactly what the fuck kind of power he really has, and what's borrowed power. Where is he going with this? Does he just want to rule the entire, I would imagine, Old Kingdom and Ancestry eventually as well. But I would assume lots of dead people. Or does he just want to kind of enslave them? I guess that's where my disconnect is that they are trying to kill his body to make it so that he is much more vulnerable and more easy to defeat. But if he isn't defeated, what does that actually look like? So yeah, let's start off at the start of this. We ended the last section right when she finds her dad, comes back to the reservoir, and the dead are all starting to gather around poor Touchstone, who is standing there, I was going to say essentially alone. He has Mogget with him. This description, guys, that opens this chapter is really the stuff of nightmares. I'm going to read this to y'all. Touchstone could see the dead now and had no difficulty hearing them. They were chanting and clapping, decayed hands meeting together in a steady, slow rhythm that put all the hairs on the back of his head on edge. A ghastly noise, hard sounds of bone on bone, or the liquid thumpings of decomposed, jellying flesh. The chanting was even worse, for very few of them had functioning mouths. Touchstone had never seen or heard a shipwreck. Now he knew the sound of 1,000 sailors drowning all at once in a quiet sea. Yo! That's so fucking gross. And then the lines of the dead had marched out close to where Touchstone stood, forming a great mass of shifting shadow, spread like a choking fungus around the columns. That is just some good writing right there. Like a choking fungus. Blah. Gross. I would like to, well, I guess I'll get there in a second because I was about to make a comment about something else. But the Mordicant comes in first. And I don't think I really anticipated the Mordicant being here. I have to be honest. Like, I just thought the Mordicant was ascending kind of thing that Caragor would use if there was need, but that if he is able to come himself, he's not going to bother with. But he calls the Mordicant his hound later. So apparently this is just like his not right-hand guy, but like a pet for him. And considering how terrifying a Mordicant is and how Sabriel is not unworthy and has a pretty good handle on a lot of what she knows how to do. And she was like almost killed by this thing right away. The fact that he can treat something like a Mordicant as a pet is alarming. It's alarming. I don't like it. So he says fog is rolling down the stairs behind it. A free magic trick, that one. I wonder why he has such an urge to impress. Rogir always was flamboyant, Touchstone stated, as if he might be commenting on someone at a dinner party. He liked everyone to be looking at him. He's no different as Caragor, no different dead. Oh, but he is, said Mogget. Very different. He knows you're here, and the fog's for vanity. He must have been terribly rushed making the body he wears now. A vain man, even a dead one, would not like this body looked at. Yeah, so, first of all, I love the fact that Caragor is a dramatic bitch. Like, being a drama queen when you're this kind of villain is super duper fun. And I really love when villains aren't drama queens because it can be kind of surprising that they're as brutal as they are and they get to the point. But when you're dealing with a world in which magic is available, you don't really want that kind of villain, right? You want somebody who's going to have a light show, who's going to have fog rolling in ahead of them like he's got fucking smoke machines going. I don't know how many of you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but there's a character in that who they talk about throwing some event and she offers to loan them her smoke machines. And they're like, you have more than one? And she says something like, I like to have multiple smoke machines going every time I enter the kitchen in the morning. I like to start my days with vivacity. And that is one of my favorite things. And I really want to imagine that Caragor does this kind of thing in every room he goes into. Like, just, he's about to go to the bathroom and the fucking bathroom is already filled with fog and smoke by the time he gets into it. And anybody who has to use the bathroom after him, it's not the smell of him having used the bathroom. It's this fucking smoke in the air that they're like, oh, I don't want to use the bathroom after Caragor. Oh, this is such a drag. I would love that. That would be so funny. Also, his people are dead, so it wouldn't work. But how funny would it be if they, like, a couple of them had asthma and just were coughing all the time, every time that they were around him. So I really, like, just this whole intro for him is so weird and funny to me. Touchstone, by the by, he's holding his ground as best he can, but he's not impervious. This is really freaking him out. And all of a sudden, the fucking Mordicant goes for him. And Touchstone leaps back and falls under the water. And I felt for him because it turns out that the Mordicant is just fucking with him. It backs off and he can hear all of the dead like laughing at him, which just rude. Again, you know, like, What a mean little trick. And it causes him to genuinely, like, fuck himself up. It says he panicked, thinking the Mordekin would be on him in a second, and flipped himself back up with unnecessary force, savagely ripping his stomach muscles. Oh, that sucks. But when he comes back up, the Mordekin is retreating. It's not coming at him, and he realizes. And Caragor says, "Did my hound scare you, little brother?" Fucking Caragor, you know what? Get the fuck out of here. Meanwhile, Mogget, realizing that poor Touchstone is about to go down into the water, jumps off him and jumps onto Sabriel, and she can feel it, even though she hasn't quite come through yet, on her physical body. And she and her father are kind of poised right behind the gate and listening to what's happening. And her father tells her, "When we emerge, I want you to take Touchstone and run for the southern stairs. Do not stop for anything at all. Once outside, climb up to the top of the palace hill to the west yard. It's just an empty field now. Touchstone will know how to get there. If the Clare are watching properly and haven't gotten their wens mixed up, there'll be a paper wing there. There are several around. The Abhorsen who made it taught several others how to construct them. It should be there. The Clare will also be there, or a messenger, to tell you where to find Caragor's body in Ancestieri. Fly as close to the wall as possible, cross, find the body, and destroy it." So, he asks her to give him Astariel, the seventh bell, which is the one that pulls everything who hears it into death, which we find out later, has a more compelling pull for some than for others. I'm going to mention that the Clares are a specific bloodline, apparently, but I don't know anything about this, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm supposed to know. So, Abbey, if there's something that I'm not remembering that they mentioned about the Clares, let me know, because I feel like I didn't realize that they were like a bloodline. I thought that they were like a particular race of people specifically. And I looked it up, and I made sure to not like open anything. I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't missed something, and it said, like, the first search term came up, and it was like a bloodline, and, you know, and I was like, okay, a bloodline, that's all I really need to know. Remember when Sabriel summoned the water when she was at Abhorsen's house? She called to the Clare to send the water. Oh, I do not remember that. Okay. Huh. Yeah, I don't remember that. Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm glad Abbey says they've been mentioned once or twice, so I haven't missed too much. But yeah, that particular thing I do not remember. Man, I don't know how I forgot that. It makes me want to go back and reread that. All right, so she knows when her father takes this, what this means. It essentially is him sacrificing himself. And she tries to say, there has to be another way to do this. And he's like, "Sweetie, look, you already knew I wasn't going to be able to stay in my body for long. And everything has to die at some point. It's just how things work. And this is my time. I tried to teach you as well as I can. I'm sure that you're going to be up to the task, but it's just the way it has to be." Abbey says, "It's a really brief moment. Abhorsen pays her respects to the Clare and requests the gift of water." Oh, okay. Huh. Wild. Okay, cool. So she hugs her dad, and there's this long moment of them silently saying goodbye to each other. And then they turn and they head back out into life. And I love this moment because poor Touchstone is standing there, and Caragor is doing his evil laughter an obscene cackle that rose to a manic crescendo before suddenly cutting to an ominous silence. The dead resumed their drumming, softer now, and the fog drifted forward with horrible certainty. Oh, God. Caragor, you know what? Never change. So, he's standing there when he hears this weird cracking sound, because, reminder, Sabriel and her dad are both coated in ice, so when they come back into life, they have to, like, shake it off and break it up, which is just such a weird, like, I would love to actually see that on screen, what that's like. And Touchstone is very grateful that they are both here, but is so taken aback by the fact that they are supposed to just run, because he's been mentally prepping himself for a fucking fight, you know? And it turns out that that's not what's going to go down right now. And we get a description before they run of what Caragor looks like. Guys, this is so alarming. All I can think of is like a claymation. Like, I kept thinking about Nightmare Before Christmas or Corpse Bride, kind of like a Tim Burton-esque, out of proportion and weird moving man. By weird moving, I mean sort of like the way that stop motion looks. I added that detail mentally and like unconsciously, but I like it because it's so much creepier. Behind it, with one elongated hand upon its bog clay head, stood something that might be thought of as a man. Staring, Touchstone saw that Caragor had tried to make the body he currently inhabited look like the Rogir of old, but either his skills, memory, or taste were sadly lacking. I love that taste is mentioned. That, like, he's basically being like, I mean, if you think that looks good, okay. Like, I just, you know what? Because Caragor is a dramatic bitch, so he probably does have real bad taste. You know what? I bet it's just, I want to see it. Caragor stood at least 7 feet tall, his body impossibly deep-chested and narrow-waisted. His head was too thin and too long, and his mouth spread from ear to ear. His eyes did not bear looking at, for they were thin slits burning with free magic fires, not eyes at all. But somehow, even so warped, he did still have a little of the look of Rogir. Take a man, make him malleable, stretch and twist. The hideous mouth opened, yawning wider and wider. Then Caragor laughed, a short laugh, punctuated by the snap of his closing jaws. Then he spoke, and his voice was as warped and twisted as his body. So weird. His voice was still somewhat like Rogir's, but rich but rotten, wet like worm-ridden fruit. He saw both the new twisted Caragor and the other better-fashioned body he'd known as Rogir. He saw the dagger again, slashing across the queen's throat, the blood cascading out, the golden cup. A hand grabbed him, turned him around, took his left sword from his grasp. And this is when they start to run. And poor Touchstone he's unprepared to run, and he's also unprepared for leaving the diamond of protection, because as soon as they do that, he vomits, because the broken charter stones affect him so badly, so suddenly, and he hasn't mentally prepared himself for it. Meanwhile, Mogget is on the Abhorsen's shoulders, her father, and I am a little bit bereft that we are leaving Mogget behind, and I'm also incredibly worried, because there he looks and sees that Mogget, his collar is gone. And I'm like, that thing was about to kill Sabriel. The only thing that fixed it from plucking her eye out of her head was her putting its collar back on. If the Abhorsen, let's say that the bell that he uses to summon everything into death doesn't work on Mogget for whatever reason, maybe it can't die, I don't know, there's nobody remaining to put the collar back on. So this thing is free to continue to pursue Sabriel, which is very worrying to me. It's going to be obligated, I think, in the immediate moment to help the Abhorsen, but after it's completed whatever help it's supposed to do, I imagine it's just free to wander around. And she's going to have to be, like, constantly on her guard, or it could team up with fucking Karagor, which seems real bad. I'm very worried about it. I don't even, like, Karagor apparently does not get summoned into death because he's right back, or he just, he gets summoned in enough to delay him and comes back out again. I don't really know how this works. Anyway, they're running, and like I said, he throws up. Then another sound began, cutting through the noise with the clarity of perfection. It started softly, like a tuning fork lightly struck, but grew, a pure note, blown by a trumpeter of inexhaustible breath, till there was nothing but the sound of a stereo. Sabriel and Touchstone both stopped almost in mid-stride. They felt a terrible urge to leave their bodies, to shuck them off as so much worn-out baggage. Their spirits, their essential selves, wanted to go into death and plunge joyfully into the strongest current, to be carried to the very end. "Think of life," screamed Sabriel, her voice only just audible through the pure note. She could feel Touchstone dying, his will insufficient to hold him in life. He seemed almost to expect this sudden summons into death. "Fight it!" she screamed again, dropping her sword to slap him across the face. "Live!" Still, he slipped away. Desperate, she grabbed him by the ears and kissed him savagely, biting his lip, the salty blood filling both their mouths. His eyes cleared, and she felt him concentrate again, concentrate on life, on living. His sword fell, and he brought his arms up around her and returned her kiss. Then he put his head on her shoulder, and she on his, and they held each other tightly till the single note of a stereo slowly died. Well, I guess that's a way to get a man to focus. I really enjoy this. Like, I'm not super into the romance between the two of them because I just feel like we haven't gotten enough characterization to know much. So later on, he tells her that he loves her. And I'm kind of like, do you? I don't believe you. It's been like 4 days. Stop it. However, it's fun. It's fine. I'm not mad at it. I'm just kind of like, nah, whatever. So they manage to get outside, and they are running, and these motherfucking scavengers are after them. Did I tell you guys that this shit was reminding me, like, that there was too much to worry about, and that I was feeling like Fellowship of the Ring? Because that's what I'm feeling like. You just cannot find a moment's peace. You know, as soon as they get outside, which I think is a win because they're in the sun, they're just regular old human bastards that are out here to fuck shit up. Like, great. Thanks, you fucking jerks. So they're chasing them, and they have bows. And they nail Sabriel in the side. Really didn't expect that. They're able to heal her pretty well. It's not a complete heal. She points out, like, that it looks like it's something that's been healing for a couple of weeks by the time the magic is done. But it's better than because I was really thinking between that and him, like, tearing his stomach muscles, I was just like, you guys are in really bad shape. How are you going to be able to, like, keep this up? And Touchstone, basically, when she gets shot, the magic in him kind of takes over and goes a little bananas. It's like if you, adrenaline isn't a strong enough word. I'm trying to think of something to compare this to. It's just all out. Like, whatever stopper there is to make sure that he doesn't overload gets yanked out, and all of his magic at once is dumped into his system, and he goes crazy. He leapt up, thrust his arms out and down towards the enemy, towards that over-gifted marksman. 8 small suns flowered at his fingertips, grew to the size of his clenched fists, and shot out, leaving the white trails of afterimage in the air. A split second later, a scream from below testified to their finding at least one target. Numbly, Sabriel wondered how Touchstone could possibly still have the strength for such a spell. Wonder became surprise as he suddenly bent and lifted her up, pack and all, cradling her in his arms, all in one easy motion. She screamed a little as the arrow shifted in her side, but Touchstone didn't seem to notice. He threw his head back, roared out an animal-like challenge, and started to run up the road, gathering speed from an ungainly lurch to an inhuman sprint. Froth burst from his lips, blowing out over his chin and onto Sabriel. Every vein and muscle in his neck and face corded out, and his eyes went wild with unseeing energy. He was berserk, and nothing could stop him now save for total dismemberment. So he just keeps on running until they get to the paper wings, and then he literally passes out. His eyes just roll back and he just falls down, and he's like twitching. Bad scene. And I'm really curious about this because, it says charter magic exploded inside him. And I'm assuming, like I said, that as a result of her being injured and him caring a lot about her, loving her, allegedly, that this motivated him in some way to access a power reservoir that he didn't know was there. However, I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that somebody loaned him some extra power somehow. I have no idea how that would work in this world. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be pretty fun to find out that there had been something put in place, as an eventuality for this kind of thing happening to help speed their progress. Maybe Abhorsen had laid something, or, I don't know. But I'll be curious to see if we revisit what happened here and talk about it more, because there's a certain tone to it that makes it sound like Sabriel knows what's going on here. Like she's either seen this before or heard about this happening, because she's so determined to try and slow him down and stop him. And I wonder if it's possible to straight up burn yourself out and kill yourself because you've just expended too much. Because he's in a really bad way. The only reason he's able to come back to himself and be functioning again as quickly as he is because the Claires are there and they're able to do something magically to help heal him. And the Claires that are here are twins. And I love this because their being twins and being here is sort of like dialing up the surrealism of this whole scene a whole other notch, like a couple of notches. The symmetricality, is that a word? Symmetry, there it is. The symmetry of the two of them standing on either side of her and speaking at the exact same time into her her ears, plural, is super duper creepy. I know they're good guys and they're really good at what they do, obviously, but there is something about this that makes it so much freakier. And I really, really enjoyed this. So yeah, they pull the arrow out and they tell her that they were the scavengers had been right behind them, but they tell her, oh, he ran real fast. So we've got about 10 minutes, actually. He's far ahead. And they have time to pull the arrow out to heal him. And when they heal her and she sits up, the Claires say, we've only been allowed to be the Claire today because we're the best paper wing pilots. Or, actually, Rael is, one of the twins said, pointing at the other. But since she would need a paper wing to fly home in, 2 paper wings were needed. So, Sanar came too, Rael continued, pointing back at her sister. Both of us, they chorused. Now, there isn't much time. You can take the red and gold paper wing. We painted it with the royal colors when we knew last week. But first, there's Karagor's body. So, let's talk about the raddest idea that I have ever heard of. Guys, this is so cool. These bitches basically are like, oh, right, I guess we're going to need like an iPad or something. Can we whip one of those up real quick? It is the coolest. One, possibly Rael, Sabriel had already gotten them confused, brought a bottle made of clear green glass out from the flowing sleeve of her robe, the telltale flash of charter magic showing it hadn't been there before. The other woman, Sanar, produced a long ivory wand out of her sleeve. Rael unstoppered the bottle with a resonant pop, and in one quick motion poured out the contents along a horizontal line. Sanar, equally quickly, drew the wand across the falling water, and it froze in midair to form a pane of transparent ice, a frozen window suspended in front of Sabriel. "Watch," commanded the women, and Sanar tapped the ice window with her wand. It clouded over at that touch, briefly showed a scene of whirling snow, a glimpse of the wall, then steadied into a moving vision, much like a film shot from a traveling car. Wyverley College had frowned on films, but Sabriel had been to see quite a few in Bane. This was much the same, but in color, and she could hear natural sounds as clearly as if she were there. How awesome is that? I love this idea. It's just, I just think that's so clever and creative. And, you know, there are so many writers that would just have had there be like, you know, a picture just appeared in space, like a vision, you know. Instead, having this be on like a pane that they have to create makes it feel so much more interesting and delicate and grounds it somehow in a way that makes it seem like more possible, even though it's not like instantly freezing the water that, you know, like, but there's something about it that I feel like adds a layer of weird realism to it that I just admire a lot. So she watches, and it turns out that this body is buried in Wyverley Village in this cairn that she had thought about visiting at one point. This body has been pretty near her the whole time. She's looking at this, waiting for them to leave Wyverley completely and move on. And she is not prepared for the fact that it like begins to slow down and close in on this area that's very familiar to her. The image changed again, somehow sinking through the stone, down between the lines of mortar, zigzagging around the blocks to the dark chamber at its heart. For an instant, the ice window went completely dark. Then light came. A bronze sarcophagus lay under the cairn, metal crawling with free magic perversions of charter marks. The vision dodged these shifting marks, penetrated the bronze. A body lay inside, a living body, wreathed in free magic. And this, I think, is really interesting. Sabriel can see how similar Rogir looks to Touchstone. There's like a real resemblance between the two of them. And it makes her uncomfortable, which makes a lot of sense. I just like, the family resemblance is such a weird thing. Have you ever, like in school, gotten to know somebody really well, and then you met their parents, and it was like you were seeing like a cruder, rougher version of your friend on their faces, and you're almost like, it feels like wrong somehow. And I can't imagine seeing that sort of similarity on the face of somebody who is like more than just an enemy, like an arch nemesis. That is just such a crazy I don't know, that I feel like weirdly sympathetic to her in that moment. Something huge and monstrous was wading against the current, a jagged cutting of darkness, formless and featureless. It seemed to see her beyond the ice window and lurched forward, two arms like blown storm clouds reaching forward. "Abhorsen's get!" screamed Caragor. "Your blood will gush upon the stones!" His arms seemed about to come through the window, but suddenly the ice cracked, the pieces collapsing into a pile of swift-melting slush. "We have 4 minutes till the slavers come. We'll help you get the king to your paper wing, shall we?" So, they get in there, and she's asking them some details about, like, who they are and what's going on with them. And it turns out that they're, like, distantly related. And she asks them if, because of their, like, you know, ability to see in and out of time, if they know what's going to happen. And they're like, no, we get little flashes of stuff. And sometimes as a family, if we get together, we can use all of our collective strength to focus on a particular point in time. But most of the time we don't, and we don't want to know. And then they hug her, and Sabriel is like kind of touched by that, which I thought was really sweet. So they get into their little paper wing and take off, and we go to the Horace's POV. He's still trying to shave, bless his heart. He's been trying to shave all day and keeps getting interrupted. And he hears that there is a like craft that is coming at them from Old Kingdom, which he at first says is impossible. And then he goes and like looks through the binoculars and realizes it's Sabriel, and it's like, oh shit. But he's not completely willing to like drop his guard, which is smart. I appreciated this, to be honest. He kind of thinks about telling everybody to relax. And then he's like, that might not be Sabriel though. Or it could be Sabriel being controlled by something. So I think we better be careful here. And there is this adorable dude named Jorbert who is so excited about this whole development. And it turns out that he has been seeking a transfer to the Flying Corps 8 times in a row now. There's something really precious about that to me, that like, there's just a time to have this little moment with this little side character that's just like, a plane, oh boy! Like, I don't know, I just really like this detail, because it does not need to be here, but it's just sort of fun. So, he goes and meets Sabriel, and he has to kind of tell her to be a little bit more discreet, because she's out here just loudly talking about, well, you know, everything's about to go wrong, so all of this electricity is certainly not going to be working shortly. And he has to be like, can you just like keep it down a little bit? Because like, we're trying to prep them, but also you don't need to make it sound so dire. And she's like, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Where's the part that I wanted to mention? Oh, here it is. She says that she's been gone at least 16 days. So she expects the full moon to be over and done with already. But time is working really weirdly, as he has told her, and it's only been about 8 days. So, yeah. I'm trying to, like, I think they say about 8 or 9 days, something like this. But anyway, yeah, it hasn't been as long as she thinks it has been for them. They go and have a little meeting while she and Touchstone eat some food. He offers to like give them a break and rest, and she's just like, that'd be awesome, but we just can't do that. We can't afford to take the time right now. So she tells him, have you heard the name Caragor? And Horace just puts his drink down and is like, oh, fuck. She's like, yeah, he's definitely coming. I don't know how long it's going to take for him to get here. He could come at night, which would be great because that gives us more time, but he can manipulate the weather. So he doesn't have to wait. Like, this is a very different system. And I find this to be more, it's simultaneously more interesting narratively and also like more inconvenient / convenient. It sort of depends on your point of view. Dresden Files has the similar thing where there are creatures that can't come out during the day, right? Or creatures that they have to be in a safe zone during the day, which we'll get to that book eventually, but I won't get into that. And it's a sort of like, it's not the actual effect of being touched by sunlight. It is the principle of the fact that the sun is out in the world right now. So you could be indoors and that won't help you. Or you can be out in the sun, literally, but if you are in a safe zone, you're okay, despite being hit by the sun. This is a whole other thing where it's the actual sunlight that's what they have to avoid so they can, and when I say it's narratively like it could be considered convenient or inconvenient, I feel like there is a plus and minus to it. Dresden Files, you have the safety of the day that's sort of guaranteed for certain creatures. There are certainly plenty of things in those books that can come out during the day. That's not, but there are certain things that either can't or are severely weakened. And it's a line in the sand. You kind of know. And that is beneficial to the characters in some ways, but also limits exactly when you can have people interact and how much time they have to interact. And then we have this where she can have there be sun, but give them power like what Karagor is doing, where he can manipulate the weather and render it completely irrelevant, which, you know, you could say is more convenient because she just wants him to be able to get wherever he needs to go when she wants him to get there. But it's less convenient for the characters by far because they are given way fewer windows and much less security within those windows. So I just find it interesting, the two different approaches and how different the story winds up being because of a simple rule like that. So he's asking them, so they can't just like pop out right near where the cairn is, right? They have to actually cross the wall. And Sabriel says, yeah, they have to emerge in Old Kingdom and then physically cross. So we're not going to be able to stop him. And he's like, what do you mean? We can't not try. That's our whole job. And she's like, I understand that's your whole job. And ordinarily with other creatures, I would say, do your best. But this guy is not going to be stopped. And you're going to lose a lot of decent men for no reason. So I really don't think it's worth it. And he kind of doesn't really like know how to respond to that. He says, let's see, where is it? I will give you 12 charter mages, half of the full complement, but I will also add some more mundane force and a detachment to escort you. But I can't promise we won't fight on the perimeter. And Sabriel's like, we're going to need you too, BT Dubs. And he's like, me? No, I need to stay here. This is like, again, my whole job. And she's like, listen, things are about to hit the fan. You are not going to be getting in trouble for abandoning your post because it's going to be so hectic that they won't even know what's going on. And this is where you need to be to help. And Horace he says like, oh, I'll think it over, but inevitably realizes that he really has to do this. And they head down, and I have to say there is something like, it's hard to shake the trust that you have as especially a white American in the institutions of things. When I find out that like basically the army is getting involved, there is a certain amount of comfort in that to me. And the fact that they're getting this escort and all of these guns, like granted, it all functions on technology. So it will very shortly be rendered completely moot. But there is a sort of like reassuring, I can't help it, you know? And there's this really interesting moment. Are you coming with us? Sabriel asked. Yes, replied Horace slowly. He seemed surprised at his own answer, and suddenly far away. Yes, I am. You have the sight, said Touchstone, looking up from where he was adjusting his scabbard before sitting down. What did you see? The usual thing, replied Horace. He got on the front seat and nodded to the driver. What do you mean? Asked Sabriel, but her question was lost as the driver pressed the starter switch, and the car coughed and spluttered into life. Touchstone jumped at the sudden noise and vibration. What did he mean, the usual thing? Asked Sabriel. Touchstone looked at her, sadness and exhaustion vying for first place in his gaze. He took her hand in his own and traced a line across her palm, a definite, ending sort of line. Oh, muttered Sabriel. She sniffed and looked at the back of Horace's head, eyes blurring, seeing only the line of his cropped silver hair extending just past his helmet rim. He has a daughter the same age as me back at somewhere south. Why, oh, why does everyone, and she just kind of falls apart for a second, which, you know what? Fair. I'm not even mad at you. There really is a point in life where you just start to realize that, like, people just... Life isn't fair and it sucks and good people get hurt and good people suffer loss and it's just, like, the way it goes and it's the worst. But I assume when she says the usual thing, he's seeing his own death. And it's weird because he says the usual thing like he sees this all the time. I don't know if that's what he means or if he means the usual thing like everybody with the sight always sees their own death. But regardless, the fatalism of it is just really like, ouch, you know? And I have to admire somebody who just like decides to carry out their duty anyway. You know, I can't help but think if I were in the position where I was able to see that I was about to die because I went somewhere, I would just be like, well, I'm not going there. Done. We're fine. I figured it out. And it's not logical because I assume really in my, like, if he told me that he wasn't going because he saw he was going to die, my immediate response would be like, well, then you're just going to die somewhere else. Like, Karagor's coming. So on that note, you're going to die. And also, Greek myths, as much as you try and ignore the thing that you don't want to happen, that causes it to happen. So guess what? But there is a point where that kind of logic, when it's you, just fails to make any sort of impression, you know? So they head out, and a lot of people are starting to realize that something is not okay. And eventually, they start to ring the bells, which is something that apparently has not had to happen in a really, really long time. And there is a clear, like, warning that is taught to everybody in class from when they're a child that goes, be inside by nightfall, lock all doors and windows, deny entry to strangers, shed light inside and out, prepare candles and lanterns for when the electricity fails, wear silver, if caught indoors, find running water, or if caught outdoors, find running water. We used to recite that in the junior classes, Sabriel said, but I don't think too many people remember it, even the people around here. You'd be surprised, ma'am, interrupted the driver. The bells haven't rung like this in 20 years, but plenty of folk remember. They'll tell anyone who doesn't know. Don't fret about that. And Sabriel is just like, you know what? I really hope you're right. So they managed to get to Wiverley Village about 6. And at this point, Horace is trying to like contact everybody back at the wall, and it is not working. There are all kinds of things happening. Sometimes it just doesn't like ring. Sometimes they pick up and he can have like a moment of talking with them and then it goes dead. It's just really clear that Karagor is coming now. He is not waiting for the evening. There is a fog approaching. It is serious. And this man is traveling a lot faster than they expected. They just don't have the time that they were hoping they had. Meanwhile, Horace handed the telephone back to his signaler and turned toward them. Touchstone watched him, suddenly conscious that he probably only had 5 seconds to be alone with Sabriel, to say something, to say anything. Perhaps the last 5 seconds they would ever have alone together. "I'm not afraid," he said to himself. "I love you," he whispered. "I hope you don't mind." I fucking love that. I hope you don't mind. You know what? That's a pretty good way to say it, honestly. And she says back, "I don't mind. I think I might love you too. But now is..." And then they get cut off. So that's established. That's fun. Around 20 miles an hour, it'll reach us around 7:30. The fog that's coming towards them. This is the first assessment that he makes, but then he gets a call later and he realizes that it's actually traveling faster. So they have to go to the cairn and start to dig up the stones that are placed over it. And it is not pleasant for anybody. They lever the first one off, and right away there's this like buzzing that makes all of them kind of go, "Oh God, oh, what was that?" And as they continue to pull layers off, it's getting worse and worse till eventually, like, some of the younger guys are so violently sick that they have to be like carried away. The others were working more slowly, their energies directed to keeping lunches down and quelling shaking limbs. Oh man, you guys, I was just sick, and I had a moment where I had that kind of sick where I was like nauseous and shaking violently and had a cold sweat, and it is so awful. And I just like felt it. I really viscerally felt what they were feeling in this scene, and I was just like, oh God, it's all Surprisingly, given their lack of sleep and generally run-down state, Sabriel and Touchstone found it relatively easy to resist the waves of nausea emanating from the cairn. It didn't compare with the cold, dark fear of the reservoir, there on the hill with the sunshine and the fresh breeze warming and cooling at the same time. So, they take a break, and this is when he gets the call that the fog is traveling faster than they thought. And he asks her exactly what they're going to need to do. And she says, once we have access to the sarcophagus, we're probably going to need to use a spell to get it open. And we'll probably need everybody's help in order to accomplish that. And then we have to actually do the cremation spell. And there is definitely going to be resistance to that too. And she asks him, have your men often cast charter magic in concert? Unfortunately, no, replied Horace, frowning. Because the army doesn't officially admit the existence of charter magic, everyone here is basically self-taught. Never mind, Sabriel said, trying to sound confident, aware that everyone around her was listening. We'll manage. Good, replied Horace, smiling. Don't care for that. I hate having to fake being confident about something. So yeah, he tells her, is it possible that this Caragor could know what we're up to? Yes, replied Sabriel and Touchstone together. We'd better get a move on then, Horace announced, looking at his watch. I'd say we now have less than 40 minutes. And that is the end of chapter 26. That's the end of the section. It's a pretty good spot to end. It looks like there's about enough for one more episode, including the final 3 chapters and then the epilogue. So the next episode is going to finish this book off. So that's pretty exciting. And, Abbey is over here at Horse and Pacer. Oh, I read that one. I met on the romance also. Okay, good. That's not just me. I understand the need that a lot of authors feel to include romance. I just don't care about it most of the time. Now and then, if it's characters that I've really gotten to know, it matters to me. But in the very first book of a series, or just a single solitary book, often it's not enough for me to feel invested. Jorber is so cute, isn't he, though? I was, like, concerned, honestly, that something was going to happen to him. And there's still some chapters to go, so something may still happen. But he's one of those, like, adorable little side characters that movies will tend to set up and then make you like in an instant just to kill them a little bit later. So I'm kind of like, oh, Jorber, please be okay. I just want you to be all right. If that's cool with you, it's cool with me. And yeah, it will be a short reading. All right. Well, I am ready. But yeah, this was really fun. And I'm, like I said, the difference in the tone when Karagor knows what they're doing and is like heading out there. First of all, I was shocked that Abhorsen is just like, oh yeah, there's going to be some Claire up there who will tell you exactly where to find his body. What? I was so not ready for that. I thought that they were going to have to use like all kinds of spells and detective work, that there was going to be like a search for it and that the search would go into the next book maybe. If there is, I don't even know, what is this a series, right? There's more than one. It is a series. Okay, I kind of expected finding Karagor's body to take more than one book, that this was going to be the beginning of the second half of, or the second quarter even, of a overarching mission, a quest, and that Abhorsen would have been able to like drag Karagor into death with him long enough to buy them time to like the end of the book. And then the next book, they were going to be working on finding the body, and we would have Karagor managing to escape from death again. But everything is so accelerated. It's a very different pace and a different tone because of the pace than I expected, which I enjoy. I like being surprised. So yeah, I'm always a fan of when things do not fall into the lines that I have unconsciously drawn. It's so funny how you can have expectations and not even realize that you have them until somebody starts to do a whole other thing. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you again to Abbey so much for commissioning this. This has been a lot of fun to read. It's so creative. And I hope that you guys are enjoying the coverage, and I will be seeing you all again soon with the final chapters of this book. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.